Welcome to our continuing series, Fine Poetry, the poems of Rainer Maria Rilke, Part 2. Duino Elegies. The first elegy. Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angels' hierarchies? And even if one of them suddenly pressed me against his heart, I would perish in the embrace of his stronger existence. For beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we are barely able to endure and are awed because it serenely disdains to annihilate us. Each single angel is terrifying, and so I force myself, swallow, and hold back the surging call of my dark sobbing. Oh, to whom can we turn for help? Not angels, not humans, and even the knowing animals are aware that we feel little secure and at home in our interpreted world. There remains perhaps some tree on a hillside daily for us to see. Yesterday's street remains for us stayed, moved in with us, and showed no signs of leaving. Oh, and the night, when the wind full of cosmic space invades our frightened faces. Whom would it not remain for, that longed after gently disenchanting night, painfully there for the solitary heart to achieve? Is it easier for lovers? Don't you know yet? Fling out of your arms the emptiness into the spaces we breathe. Perhaps the birds will feel the expanded air in their more fervent flight. Yes, the springtime were in need of you. Often a star waited for you to espy it and sense its light. A wave rolled toward you out of the distant past. Or as you walked below an open window, a violin gave itself to your hearing. All this was trust. But could you manage it? Were you not always distraught by expectation, as if all this were announcing the arrival of a beloved? Where would you find a place to hide her, with all your great, strange thoughts coming and going, and often staying for the night? When longing overcomes you, sing of women in love, for their famous passion is far from immortal enough. Those whom you almost envy, the abandoned and desolate ones, whom you found so much more loving than those gratified, begin ever new again the praise you cannot attain. Remember, the hero lives on and survives. Even his downfall was for him only a pretext for achieving his final birth. But nature, exhausted, takes lovers back into itself, as if such creative forces could never be achieved a second time. Have you thought of Gaspara Stampa sufficiently? That any girl, abandoned by her lover, may feel from that far intenser example of loving, ah, might I become like her? Should not their oldest sufferings finally become more fruitful for us? Is it not time that lovingly we freed ourselves from the beloved and quivering, endured as the arrow endures the bowstring's tension, and in this tense release becomes more than itself? For staying is nowhere. Voices, voices, listen, my heart, as only saints have listened, until the gigantic call lifted them clear off the ground. Yet they went on, impossibly, kneeling, completely unawares. So intense was their listening. Not that you could endure the voice of God, far from it, but listen to the voice of the wind and the ceaseless message that forms itself out of silence. They sweep toward you now from those who died young. Whenever they entered a church in Rome or Naples, did not their fate quietly speak to you as recently as the tablet did in Santa Maria Formosa? What do they want of me? To quietly remove the appearance of suffered injustice that at times hinders a little their spirits from freely proceeding onward. Of course, it is strange to inhabit the earth no longer, to no longer use skills one had barely time to acquire, not to observe roses and other things that promised so much in terms of a human future, no longer to be what one was in infinitely anxious hands, to even discard one's own name as easily as a child abandons a broken toy. Strange not to desire to continue wishing one's wishes. Strange to notice all that was related, fluttering so loosely in space. And being dead is hard work, and full of retrieving before one can gradually feel a trace of eternity. Yes, but the living make the mistake of drawing too sharp a distinction. Angels, they say, are often unable to distinguish between moving among the living or the dead. The eternal torrent whirls all ages along with it, through both realms forever, and their voices are lost in its thunderous roar. In the end, the early departed have no longer need of us. One is gently weaned from things of this world, as a child outgrows the need of its mother's breast. But we, who have need of those great mysteries, we for whom grief is so often the source of spiritual growth, could we exist without them? is the legend vain that tells of music's beginning in the midst of the morning for Linus? The daring first sounds of song piercing the barren numbness, and how in that stunned space an almost godlike youth suddenly left forever, and the emptiness felt for the first time those harmonious vibrations which now enrapture and comfort and help us. Translated by Albert Ernest Fleming. Fear of the inexplicable. But fear of the inexplicable has not alone impoverished the existence of the individual. The relationship between one human being and another has also been cramped by it, as though it had been lifted out of the riverbed of endless possibilities and set down in a fallow spot on the bank, to which nothing happens. For it is not inertia alone that is responsible for human relationships repeating themselves from case to case, indescribably monotonous and unrenewed. It is shyness before any sort of new, unforeseeable experience with which one does not think oneself able to cope. But only someone who is ready for everything, who excludes nothing, not even the most enigmatical, will live the relation to another as something alive, and will himself draw exhaustively from his own existence. For if we think of this existence of the individual as a larger or smaller room, it appears evident that most people learn to know only a corner of their room, a place by the window, a strip of floor on which they walk up and down. Thus, they have a certain security. And yet, that dangerous insecurity is so much more human, which drives the prisoners in Poe's stories to feel out the shapes of their horrible dungeons and not be strangers to the unspeakable terror of their abode. We, however, are not prisoners. No traps or snares are set about us, and there is nothing which should intimidate or worry us. We are set down in life as in the element to which we best correspond, and over and above this, we have, through thousands of years of accommodation, become so like this life, that when we hold still, we are, through a happy mimicry, scarcely to be distinguished from all that surrounds us. We have no reason to mistrust our world, for it is not against us. Has it terrors? They are our terrors. Has it abysses? Those abysses belong to us, are dangers at hand. We must try to love them. And if only we arrange our life according to that principle, which counsels us that we must always hold to the difficult, then that which now still seems to us the most alien will become what we most trust and find most faithful. How should we be able to forget those ancient myths about dragons that at the last moment turn into princesses? Perhaps all the dragons of our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us once beautiful and brave. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us.